Steven's irritation peaked upon discovering that his neighbor's semi-truck is once again obstructing his driveway, pushing Steven to his breaking point. Contemplating his next move, Steven began devising a solid plan. It wouldn't take long before he formulated a strategy. His neighbor would soon regret challenging him. Rushing for work and consumed by rage, Steven repeatedly blared his horn, anticipating his neighbor's emergence to clear the obstruct truck. Much to Steven's dismay, there was no sign of his neighbor coming out of the house. Dealing with this so early in the morning was beyond frustrating for him, the very last thing he needed at that moment. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Known among his friends as a laid-back and easygoing individual, Steven Adams hailed from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He maintained a small circle of close friends, valuing quality over quantity in his relationships. For Steven, life was about cherishing meaningful connections. He shared a 2-bedroom house in the amicable and tranquil Bear Canyon neighborhood with his girlfriend, Carly, whom he had been with for a year. The neighborhood had always been characterized by kindness and friendliness. However, a shift occurred when Tim, their new neighbor, settled in next door. Tim Brown, a divorced man, relocated to Albuquerque with aspirations to launch his trucking business. As time passed, neighbors began conversing over their fences, expressing their dissatisfaction with the changes that had befallen their once tranquil and idyllic neighborhood. One evening, while retrieving the mail from the mailbox, Steven exchanged a wave with his new neighbor, Tim. With no formal introduction yet, Steven believed that this moment presented the opportune time to properly introduce themselves. Approaching Tim with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity, Steven wasn't sure what to anticipate. Steven offered his hand to Tim for a handshake. Tim appeared amiable. Steven began to realize that Tim wasn't your typical neighbor. Engaging in small talk, Tim elaborated on his trucking business. Unaware of the inconvenience it posed, Steven felt fortunate that he commuted to work by car. He couldn't fathom what his neighbors were enduring, but he was soon to discover it for himself. One bright and sunny Friday morning, Steven was up and getting himself ready for a day of work. He loved Fridays and couldn't wait to finish so that he could enjoy a quiet weekend. However, as he stepped out of his front door, he was met with an unexpected sight. One of Tim's semi-trucks was blocking his driveway. Steven shook his head. He marched over to Tim and knocked on his door. He could hear music blaring from inside. He started banging loudly on the door now, hoping that Tim would finally hear him. When Tim finally opened the door, he tried really hard for Tim not to notice how annoyed he really was, but failed miserably. Morning. Can I ask you to please move your semi from my driveway? I gotta get to work and I'm already late as it is, Steven said, hoping that Tim would be apologetic for his mistake. However, Steven was in for a very difficult morning. Oh yeah. About that, I was gonna come by and ask if I could park off there, but I got really busy. You see, I don't really have space to park it anywhere else, Tim replied nonchalantly. At that point, Steven was silently fuming. He just wanted to get to work. How did this guy not understand that? Okay, cool, but can you move it now so that I can pull my car out? Steven asked. Tim shrugged, still maintaining his nonchalant attitude. Sorry, man, can't help it. Maybe you should talk to your boss about flexible work hours or something. Not my problem, he replied, turning back toward his house as if dismissing the entire situation. Steven was flabbergasted. The audacity of Tim's response left him seething with anger. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. Realizing that reasoning with Tim was futile, Steven decided to take matters into his own hands. He stormed back to his house, grabbed his phone, and dialed the local police. As he explained the situation, his frustration poured out, and he pleaded for assistance. The police, understanding the urgency, promised to send an officer over to address the issue. Steven felt a slight sense of relief. Maybe the law would finally make Tim see reason. Finally, the sound of sirens approached, signaling the arrival of the police. Addressing both men, Officer Rodriguez firmly stated, "This obstruction is a violation of city ordinances. You can't block someone's driveway, Mr. Brown. You need to move your truck immediately." Tim, however, remained defiant. "I can't move it right now. My driver left and I can't drive it myself," he argued, refusing to acknowledge the consequences of his actions. As the officer radioed for a tow truck, Steven couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and frustration. The situation had escalated far beyond what he had anticipated, but justice was finally on his side. The tow truck arrived shortly, and the driver efficiently hooked up Tim's semi. Tim, now realizing the severity of the situation, frantically pleaded with the officer to reconsider. Officer Rodriguez, unmoved by Tim's pleas, watched as the tow truck pulled away with the obstructive semi. Stephen, feeling a surge of triumph, stared at Tim, who was now left to face the consequences of his inconsiderate actions. Regret flickered in Tim's eyes, but it was too late. The other neighbors stepped out of their houses and watched as the huge semi-truck was being pulled away. Mrs. Thompson saw this as an opportunity to air her own grievances. As the tow truck disappeared around the corner, leaving behind a tense atmosphere, Stephen couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction mixed with concern. Amidst the heated discussions, some neighbors suggested taking legal action against Tim to maintain the tranquility of their community. Stephen, initially hesitant about escalating the conflict further, felt compelled to support the idea. It was clear that Tim's unwillingness to compromise required a stronger response. As news of the neighborhood dispute spread, local media outlets caught wind of the story. Reporters swarmed the quiet streets of Bear Canyon, interviewing residents and capturing the tension that had gripped the community. The media coverage brought both sympathy and criticism to Bear Canyon. While some viewers sided with the frustrated neighbors, others saw Tim as a small business owner trying to make a living. Amidst the media frenzy, a court date was set to address the legal actions proposed by the community. Tim, realizing the gravity of the situation, hired a lawyer to defend his case. The courtroom buzzed with tension as both parties presented their arguments. As the judge carefully listened to the grievances and considered the evidence, it became evident that Bear Canyon's tranquility hung in the balance. The Bear Canyon community, once united in its peaceful existence, now found itself at a crossroads, grappling with the consequences of one man's business choices. After weeks of legal battles and deliberations, the judge finally delivered the verdict. Tim Brown was ordered to relocate his trucking business to a commercial area, away from the residential neighborhood of Bear Canyon. While the decision was met with mixed emotions among the residents, it marked a significant victory for those who had fought to preserve the peace and quiet they once enjoyed. Tim reluctantly agreed to comply with the court's decision, realizing that his actions had disrupted the lives of his neighbors. With Tim's business relocated, Bear Canyon slowly began to return to its former tranquility. The media attention faded, and the once divided community sought to rebuild the neighborly bonds that had been strained during the ordeal. Thank you for watching. If you like this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscription, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories.